Thanks very much, Wendy. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all today. Thanks for joining. So today's session is all about how to stop your first-time managers from sinking. And that is because first-time managers struggling is a common problem. We often see that people that were really great individual contributors then get promoted into management roles. They don't get a lot of support and they struggle. They may be confused, they may be overwhelmed, they have a steep learning curve, and that impacts them and it also impacts their teams. So today, we're going to explore some of the challenges first-time managers face, why those challenges happen, and what we can do to help them and break that cycle. And hopefully it's a useful practical session for you. The idea is that there's some insights and ideas in here that you can apply straight away to support your new leaders more effectively. So I'm sure many of you may have been or be managers yourself. I personally have been a manager for many, many years. My first experience as a manager was way back when I worked in market research. And I think it was positioned to me along the lines of, hey, Louise, we've got a great development opportunity for you. You're going to manage a few other members of the team. And that was pretty much it. There wasn't a lot of clarity on expectations. There wasn't any training until much later. There wasn't really any guidance on where to get support or anything like that. So it's a struggle, but I was lucky. I had a great manager who was very supportive and it all worked out okay, but it could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot smoother. And I think that experience is quite commonplace when I talk to people about it. You know, many people have experienced that same journey into management. And we've all also really been impacted by our own managers. I'm sure you've got managers that you can think of that you've had that were great and amazing, and other managers that were really challenging. And we know that managers have a big impact on us and a big impact on our teams. And yet still, despite that, we often don't equip them properly. So we kind of want to put that right and have some ideas around how we can better equip them. So before we get into the content for that, let me just give you a quick introduction to myself and Willow and Puddifoot. I'm Louise Puddifoot. Most of my career has been spent in learning and development. Mostly in corporate learning and development, leading different functions. That included leading management development and leadership development, as well as, of course, being a manager myself. And I now lead Willow and Puddifoot. And at Willow and Puddifoot, we are award-winning leadership development specialists, and we work with organizations to help you in those organizations build the leadership that your business needs. And we talk about building confident, capable leaders, and we do that at every stage. So all the way through from individual contributor level to the first-time managers that we're here to talk about today, to the more experienced managers and experienced executives at the top end. And we take a really practical approach. So we really want to develop people in a way that drives real lasting change. We build our programs around our craft leadership framework, and I'll share a little bit more about that as it's relevant to first-time managers later on in today's session as well. And so all that comes together for us in providing various leadership and management development programs at those different levels, personal effectiveness pathways made up of different workshops, coaching programs, and other things like personality profiling and 360 feedback. So, thinking about first-time managers, let's start with thinking about what goes wrong. And I think there's a couple of stages where things go wrong. Firstly, there's before they're promoted into management or made a manager, if that's not a promotion. It's often the case that people that are selected for manager roles are selected for their technical skills or because they're good at their day job. So they might be the best salesperson, the best coder, et cetera, not necessarily their people skills. And that importance of things like emotional intelligence and the ability to have good relationships and good communication skills is often underestimated, as it's not recognized that the skill set that you need as a manager is really completely different than a skill set that's probably made you successful in your day job. So we're not necessarily selecting the right people for promotion, or we're not necessarily then giving them the development they need to build on those skills that they might already be lacking. And then the next step is once they're in the role. So once they've moved into a manager role, often it's the case that it's not made clear what's expected of them now that they're a manager, what that means, what the difference is, what they're expected to do differently from what they've done before. There's often not a structured transition in terms of how it's going to work for them to move into this role and what needs to be done by when. They may, particularly in very fast-moving companies or where people are getting promoted quite early in their career, they might have a lack of role models to emulate in terms of management that may be good or bad role models of managers. So they haven't got a lot of experience of other managers for them to pull on themselves to know what good looks like. Fairly often people in their first management roles may be managing former peers as well, which they often find challenging to make that shift in relationship. What does it mean in terms of how I behave now to this person that used to be my peer? And then the training and the support they get is sometimes non-existent or sometimes just very basic, very poor quality. So then again, not really equipped with those skills that they need. And then because of that, we see an impact, right? So we see different things impacted. We see an impact on the culture typically. So the manager themselves and all their teams will be impacted. They may become disengaged. They won't feel psychologically safe if they're not supported, and people in the team might not feel psychologically safe if that psychological safety isn't managed well by the manager. And when you start to get bad behaviors happening, those bad habits spread and become more normalized and copied in the organization. And when managers and their teams are not sure how they should be behaving, what they should be doing, what's going on, that can also then impact their well-being as well. And then, of course, all of those cultural changes impact the business and the business results. So you might see goals starting to be missed. You might perceive the manager is underperforming, or there'll be underperformance in the team that's not well addressed, not well handled. And the team will be less productive as a result of things not being managed well. And then you might see people leave, either the manager themselves or again their team members, as they're disengaged and unhappy, they're more likely to leave the organization. So you see higher attrition. And then for us in HR, we often carry a lot of that burden of that impact. We might see over-escalation of issues, so issues that we think a manager and their team should have been able to address themselves on the ground, so to speak, bubbles up because it's not addressed and comes to us as HR and lands on our desk as something that we've got to deal with. So then we potentially end up firefighting some of those interpersonal issues and getting involved in things where really it's a communication breakdown, which could have been well addressed on the ground if people knew how to do that. Sometimes we can see that performance management isn't handled well. So if a manager doesn't know how to deal with performance management issues, things can get buried or ignored until they've really escalated. And then by the time a small error or a small performance issue gets addressed, it's kind of grown into something bigger than it needed to be. And then we in HR again need to get involved in that, when actually there's probably some conversations that needed to happen way back that were missed that have caused something to be more than it needs to be. So we end up in this position in HR where we're having to provide that reactive support, which can be frustrating and can also mean that we can't then spend the time we want to spend dealing with the other more strategic HR work that we'd like to be doing. Let me just build that slide for you. Sorry, there you go. That should be all up on the slide now. So when we think about this and why do we care about this, how common is this problem? It's actually really common. Research from the CMI and YouGov shows that 82% of managers are accidental. By that meaning managers that haven't been trained or supported well. So a really high percentage of managers in the UK being accidental. And yet research from Gallup shows that 70% of a team's engagement is as a result of the manager. So we know that the manager has a massive impact on over 2/3 of team engagement, but yet they're still not supported well to be successful and have the impact that we need them to have. So we know it's a big issue. We know it's something that we need to address. So let's take a look at the kind of challenges that first-time managers struggle with. And this is really in our own experience over many, many years working with lots of different managers, the challenges that they bring to us and that they talk about with us and the problems that they're dealing with. So firstly, giving feedback. I think feedback is one of those things human beings naturally find quite difficult to give, doesn't necessarily come naturally, and we need some guidance and frameworks to do that well. Particularly developmental feedback or negative feedback, corrective feedback, people will shy away from. If they don't know how to do that well, they'll avoid it, they'll not give the feedback, or when they do give the feedback, they'll do that ineffectively in a way that's either hard to understand or is received badly. And then on the other side of that coin, positive feedback too. We know from Gallup research that the best managers give 4 times as much positive feedback as developmental feedback. But again, it doesn't necessarily come naturally, or we might just say, well done, that's great, but not give really good positive feedback, which really encourages and motivates people and engages them and really helps them know what they're doing well. So again, people need that training and those tools to be able to give that positive feedback. I think handling conflict, again, is something that most humans find difficult. So again, people need support with handling conflict. And that can be from encouraging healthy conflict or healthy challenge. So sometimes we can see that disagreement is shut down too soon because people are uncomfortable with disagreement, but actually in a really good high-performing team, we need some healthy disagreement. We need some healthy challenge to have those good debates that really helps performance. And that can be shut down. Or it can be the case that when there is conflict and there maybe is a member of the team who feels like they're generating conflict, they don't know how to handle that. They feel very concerned about that, and it's a big issue for them, and they need some support with that. When people become managers for the first time, they often find it difficult to delegate. So they might not know what to delegate. They might feel uncomfortable delegating or uncomfortable letting go of things. Will they be done properly if they don't do them themselves? Or where they do try to delegate, they might not do that well, set expectations clearly, etc. So they need to know what they should be delegating, who they should be delegating it to, and how they should be doing that. Coaching style conversations is another thing that is really key to develop as a new manager. So instead of being just completely directive and telling people what to do, understanding when to have a coaching style conversation, how to have those two-way conversations, how to ask open questions, how to listen really well. So you can really guide people, develop people, and get the most from them. As we become a manager, we also take on some responsibility for the well-being of our team. And that can be difficult in that we often find managers don't know where the line is in terms of what they should and shouldn't be doing for well-being. So they're either very uncomfortable talking about it, or they might want to overstep it. They're not sure where they should play a role in having a conversation and where a wellbeing conversation should be referred elsewhere. So they need some guidance on how to keep the wellbeing of the team optimal, but also know when something's beyond their remit and that there's other places to go for support. And then the final one we've called out here is managing change. So I feel like managing change has been a big topic for a long time in my career now, where we've been told like the world's changing, it's never changed this fast, and it's going to carry on getting faster. And yeah, it sure as hell still is. And we're just seeing constant change all the time with new technologies and other changes in the world around us. So being able to cope with that yourself, we have to do anyway at an individual contributor level, but then being able to manage your own reactions to change and be able to communicate change in a team and manage different team member reactions becomes really important too. So we know that they're going to struggle with these things. These are good things for you to watch out for. Then we need to think about, okay, so what do we do about that? What skills do we need to develop in them so that they can cope with these challenges? And the framework we use is what we call our craft framework. So this is based on our years of experience working with different organizations, shaped by insights from leaders in those organizations and HR and L&D teams, and also in the research that we do on what effective leadership looks like at the moment and will look like in the future. So CRAFT stands for communication, resilience, authenticity, future, and transformation. And these are the capabilities that make someone a really effective human-centered leader. And it's these capabilities that we use as the foundations for our management and leadership programs. And I'll talk in a moment about how these apply specifically at the first-time manager role. So to give you an overview of those 5 skill groups for the different levels, there's a summary table here. There's a lot of information in here, and I'm not expecting you to digest it all, but it's useful, I think, to see how the skills grow as you move through different levels from individual contributor on the left here, through to emerging leader, new manager, which we're talking about today, and then so on as you progress upwards. So when we think about communication, for example, that's going to evolve from clear, confident self-expression and active listening at the individual level through to influencing, coaching, and then eventually inspiring and aligning entire organizations at a more senior level. Resilience is going to start on an individual level with managing your own workload and stress. And then as you become a manager, it's going to expand to supporting others, modeling calm under pressure, and then ultimately at the more senior levels to looking after team and business resilience as businesses go through change and complexity. Authenticity really begins with knowing your own values and acting with integrity. And then at a manager level, it grows into building trust, psychological safety, and culture, through to emotionally intelligent and values-led leadership. When we think about future, we're really thinking about developing ourselves and our teams for the future. So at an individual level, it's about personal development and understanding the goals of your team. Through to manager level, it's more around developing others and preparing them for the future. And then at more senior levels, it's around shaping the strategy and ultimately the long-term impact of the organization by creating those future-ready cultures and future-ready leaders. And then finally, transformation at an individual level really starts with embracing small improvements and new ideas. Then it grows into leading change at a team level, at a cross-functional level, and then finally at a full organizational level to reimagine how work gets done as businesses transform. So if I zone in on the new manager level on the next slide here, these are those key behaviors called out at that new manager level and what they need to do and the skills they need to do them. So when we're thinking about our new managers, we know the things that they're going to need to do are things like giving feedback, running meetings, handling conflict. So the skills that we need to give them and support them with and train them in are things like communication, feedback, and productive conflict. For resilience, we know they're going to need to balance the pressure of tasks with people needs and manage stress in themselves and others. So they really need to understand the dynamics of a team, their own strengths, the strengths of their different team members, and be really self-aware to their own reactions. For authenticity, it's around them being consistent, being fair, being emotionally aware, and building that psychological safety in the team. So they're going to need to understand trust and psychological safety, have the skills to build trust and psychological safety in their teams, and the skills to manage their own emotions and manage their own behaviors as well. For future, they're going to need to be able to delegate well. They're going to need to be able to develop other people and motivate them. So it's those skills around delegation, motivation, and development they're going to need. And then for transformation, they're going to need to lead team level change and challenge unhelpful norms where they occur, make those changes. So they're going to need to understand people's reactions to change and how to cope with that. And they're going to need to be able to think critically themselves. So that's how we use that craft lens at this level to really understand the behaviors and the skills that new managers need. And hopefully that's useful to you as well to think about your own managers and use this lens to spot any hidden development needs or consider where people are already strong or where the biggest gaps might be. Okay, so let's think about what we can do in HR or learning and development to help this situation, what we can do at each of the different stages that we've talked about today. So, few key things we've called out here. So, before promotion or to set people up for success, first thing is thinking about defining what a manager is in your organization. And lots of organizations haven't explicitly defined what they expect from managers, which can make it confusing for people in terms of what's expected of them. So it's worth taking that time to articulate what does great people leadership look like in your organization. If you have your own leadership framework, you can look at that too, or you can use something like our craft model to help you with that as well. It's also important to select the right people for management roles, as we talked about at the beginning. So management shouldn't be a reward for strong individual performance. Not everyone wants and not everyone is suited to being a manager and leading other people. So it's really good to look for indicators of people leadership potential, things like emotional intelligence, desire to support other people, that learning mindset, etc. And then to have readiness conversations with people. So before somebody becomes a manager, having those discussions with them about what does the role involve if you're going to step into that role? Do they understand it? Are they curious about leadership? What concerns might they have about being a manager? So that you can really manage their expectations and plan their development in advance. Then when you get to that promotion stage, it's really good when someone's becoming a manager to make sure you're clearly communicating what the role involves, being clear about the responsibilities they have, how much time it's expected to take for them. A big risk often is that new managers try to do all their old job plus the new bit. They're going to have to rebalance. They're going to have to make some conscious choices about their priorities, really supporting them with that. It's good to provide some form of onboarding. A lot of onboarding in organizations is quite technical. So these might be the systems, the processes, the compliance that you need to use. Also think about the people side from an onboarding perspective. What are the cultural expectations? What's your people strategy? What support's available there for them? And it can also be really useful to connect them with internal buddies. Some organizations have more formal mentors or senior mentors, but even informal peer level buddies. Someone just a little bit ahead in the same journey, fairly recently became a manager themselves, for example, can make a big difference so that they have someone to talk to. It can help normalize those ups and downs as well as give them a sounding board. And then in the early months in the role, it's good to provide them with a structured development journey. So um, giving managers a pathway of how they're going to develop. Typically, we find it better to give people more of a program built over time to develop their skills rather than just a one-off session, and really helping them develop through that, covering lots of the topics that we've talked about today. Within that, you'll want to provide continued learning touch points. So there might be follow-up workshops, nudges, some self-led learning, but really keeping learning alive once that honeymoon period of becoming a manager and maybe being trained is over. So follow-up sessions, digital access to information, that kind of thing. And giving them that supportive environment. So creating that peer network of managers, giving them places where they can share concerns or ask for ideas, giving them feedback loops and things like that too. And then obviously the role of their own line manager is really important here in terms of supporting them as well as they go through this change. So we do have a checklist which lists this out for you as well. So you can review these same points on the checklist, which we'll share with you after the session today, which hopefully is useful for you going forward too. And this is an example of somebody who has gone through one of our programs, our Ignite New Manager program. This is Dan. He's manager of one of our fintech clients. So when we started working with him as part of our cohort, he had just been promoted to lead a small team and he was finding it really difficult. He hadn't been given formal support. He was kind of second guessing his conversations, not really sure if he was being too soft or too harsh and avoiding feedback, not really delegating or delegating and it not working out. So he's redoing work himself and generally didn't feel good about being a manager. So as we worked with him, he developed that confidence and those skills that he needed, um, and kind of understood that he doesn't have to be perfect at everything. He just has to be present, be clear, and be fair. And now he's much more confident. He's much more well equipped to delegate well, to have good one-to-ones, and see when people need support. So in a much better place now. So in terms of the immediate actions you can take to wrap up, excuse me, so that you're not letting your managers sink, but you're supporting them. Um, you can use the craft lens we've shared with you today to look at where are the hidden development needs for managers in your organization. Are there any particular areas that stand out for you? And you can audit your current manager support. As I just said, we'll send you that checklist as well to help you do that and see where the gaps are. And then you don't have to do everything at once, of course, but at least choosing at least one support that you can add straight away. We do actually also have a toolkit that can support you in that as well, that covers lots of the different areas you might want to support, which will also send you through, which you can use as support too. And then start having a development program. You can start with a small pilot. You don't have to solve everything at once. You can test things out, see what works, and start piloting programs to develop your managers in that way too. As well as the resources I've mentioned, we have a few different blog items on our website, which you're welcome to take a look at. That might be helpful as you develop your new managers. And you're welcome to connect with me and ask me any questions as well if that's useful. But yeah, now that's everything we wanted to share with you today. So now we'll turn it over to Q&A for any questions.
We do, in fact, have a couple of questions. The first one is, what's the ideal timing for manager training? For example, before they take on the team or after?
Yeah, we generally find that ideally it's good to train somebody at the beginning of them becoming a manager. So when they have become a manager, but early on in their journey. Although in theory it sounds good to train people before they become a manager, it's quite challenging for people to apply the learning well when they haven't started experiencing the challenges and started experiencing the situations. We find it more useful for them to be in the role so that they're able to relate that back to their real life examples, and so that as they're learning things, they're then able to go back and put them into practice, put the models and the frameworks we're teaching them into practice in real time, and see how they work. So that's ideal. You probably have someone within their first 3 to 6 months in the role. Obviously, in an organization, depending how big the organization is, that's not always possible for every manager to put them all on a program exactly in that timing. So there'll be flexibility around that. We often train people in new manager training who've been there longer, but they just haven't been trained yet. But if you're talking about the ideal, that's probably good.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Also, there's another question here that where you have different levels of leaders that potentially need development, do you have any recommendation which level they should start at?
Yeah. To some extent, it probably depends where the greatest need is. I think one thing to consider would be exactly that, like where's the biggest need, where are we seeing the biggest challenges, the biggest pain point, and potentially start there. I think all other things being equal, if you can start at the top level, that is the best way to go. We've seen that work really well when on the occasion that we've had the opportunity to do that with clients. So the benefit of starting at the most senior level is you're teaching everyone at that senior level, relevant to their level, of course, but you're teaching them the ideas and the frameworks and the philosophies around why this is important. And then as it gets rolled out to more people, throughout the levels, then they're able to support it and talk the same language and reinforce it and things like that. So it can work well to start at the more senior level and work down to if you have that opportunity.
Okay, great. Again, another good question. I do have just a question again about the resources that you've mentioned. So just to highlight and remind that we'll be sending them out afterwards,
Yes,
all the links.
absolutely. We will send you the links by email, a link to the recording of this and to the checklist and to the
Yes,
HR toolkit as well, and a
wonderful.
couple of other resources that might be handy.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we do have another question. What do you recommend when you are introducing line managing support and training for the first time in an organization? Asking from a small organization, approximately 20 managers, currently working on a handbook.
Handbook is a good place to start. Um, I think some of the things we've talked about today we'd recommend. So having a handbook sounds like a great start. Maybe as part of that, or if not already as part of that, you'd have that clear definition of what a manager is, what it entails, what's expected of them, what being a good manager at your organization looks like. If you're then looking to roll that out and change behavior, I think it's really important to have senior leadership support. So it's having a senior level stakeholder who's part of that communication as it goes out, who can talk about why this is important to the organization and show that support as well as it's coming through, and make sure they're bought into what you're doing, really, that you're connecting um, the reasons that you're wanting to develop managers and potentially train managers with why that's good for the business, what difference that's going to make for the business, so that you've got all of that side of things supported as well. And then, yeah, really starting with rolling it out to managers and making sure they've got those things we've talked about today. They've got the different bits of support um, that they need, and that you've got a good development program in place.
Brilliant. Wonderful. So that's all the questions I have for you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone. If you think of any other questions, feel free to get in touch.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to come along and watch this webinar.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.